Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning. The sun is up despite the fog. Despite the fog, I checked. Bitcoin's running. The lightning stuff seems to be taken care of. Ooh. Good morning. The sun. Sorry about that. Feedback did not mute my machine. So let's start over. The sun is up despite the fog. There really is a sunrise today. And I checked, Bitcoin's running despite the trouble we saw with lightning 2 days ago and yesterday. So we can have our coffee and talk about the news. There's lots going on. Good coffee. Good coffee. So, what's up? One of the funniest things that I noticed about everyone, Elon fighting these people and fighting those people, and everyone losing their minds, and Elon this and Elon that. Yesterday, or was it 2 days ago? While all this is going on, Twitter and the fighting, I saw one of the most amazing real videos I've ever seen in my entire life, ever. And it's in my Twitter feed if you want to see it. It's, just someone with their phone. And one of SpaceX's landable rockets falls out of the sky. And it's not afterburners, whatever. The landing rockets engage and this rocket comes down. But that's not the most amazing thing, right? We've seen the rockets land and it was amazing. And we already saw it like a year ago or 2 years ago or whenever it was. The amazing thing is another one comes into view, which shows that like we're getting used to the rockets falling, but now there's like multiple landing at once. And it's one of the most amazing pictures of the future you'll ever see, like double rockets landing. So remember that while the techno king, Elon Musk, is fighting all these people about Twitter, and we're going to talk about all of that, he's landing rockets at like a pedestrian scale, like it's normal, like you're just taking the bus, land a rocket, right? So remember, there's so much happening at once that if you just keep your eye on one thing, you're going to miss all the other stuff. Because it's the most amazing thing to watch these rockets fall. And it puts it in context. Like as people are sitting there, $8 or $20, he's landing rockets, multiple rockets simultaneously. I actually want to go and spend a bit of time in Cape Canaveral over the next couple of years. And I've had a plan to do it because my children are homeschooled. And as I understand, Elon Musk promotes homeschool within his own workers at SpaceX. So as I understand, there are a lot of rocket scientist homeschool children in the area, which I would like my kids to mix with, right? We like it, right? I think even Elon's got like 9 kids or 10 kids or something. He even said that YouTube raised his kids. So, that's why we're on YouTube and Twitter and all these other things, right? We're trying to educate folks. And today we have one of the most interesting shows I think I've ever done. It's another one of those ones that can change your life. If I get it right, if I do my job, you could leave here a different person. Justin, good morning. Good morning. Top of the morning, Dex. Justin says, the beauty of layered monetary system is that layer 2 issues don't impact the base layer value. Yeah, that's why I'm not bringing up all this lightning stuff on top of this, right? Here's a frame for you guys. I use this for the shitcoins and everything, all the engineering stuff, all the tech, right? All the tech. Tell me if it's useful in the comments, but here's what I say. And this goes back to early Bitcoin, and because I was around the Ethereum people when they created that, right? I was working right here in Toronto and working at a co-working space where Vitalik also worked. So I met him a bunch and we talked about it. I remember, still to this day, I was wrong. I asked him a stupid question at the very beginning, and I said, Vitalik, like who's going to mine this stupid thing, right? He said they're just going to show up and mine, right? And I was like, come on, like because at the time this is 2013, right? We're thinking in 2013 that that miners have showed up to mine Bitcoin was the big revelation, and no other coin could sort of figure that out at the time, right? So we were like, wow, like someone's going to try and mine it ain't going to work, right? But it worked, so give Vitalik that. It did work. People showed up to mine. They told them to go away. I heard the best insult of Ethereum ever the other day. The best. Vitalik took all the energy out of it. He took all the energy out of Ethereum. It's pretty good, right? It's pretty good. But we're not here to talk about Ethereum and what's going on. But I do want to finish that thought on Bitcoin versus layer 2s and technology and other coins and what's going on. So here's the thing. We have this habit of seeing technology in terms of consumer technology. That's what Wall Street doesn't understand. That's what most people don't understand, right? When video games came online and radios and transistor radios, and when we first started having technology in our hands every day, it was consumer technology, right? The first microchips went into the radios that, help fund the companies that put us in space to begin with, right? The rockets and all that stuff. Those were the same folks. It was the guys who invented Intel. They had made an innovation to be able to make the radio, but they didn't care about the consumer tech, right? They wanted to take that and subsidize what they wanted to do to go to space. They thought that was the most important thing. So here's the frame that I use. And this comes from the cryptography part of Bitcoin and what's going on, and really what the differences are between Ethereum and all the other coins and Bitcoin and layer 2s and all that. So this is just a side note, but I want to share it with you guys. It's this. This is why Bitcoin's so hard for some people to understand. It's not consumer technology, right? When we think of consumer technology, it's iPhone 2, iPhone 3, you want the new one, right? You want Super Nintendo, you want Nintendo 64, you want the Wii, and however the order goes, right? We think of it in sedimentary layers technology. That's a consumer technology mindset. The same does apply for the technical consumer tech type blockchains, right? So if you're into something like Solana, it's because it's literally more performant than ETH, even if Ethereum has been whatever they did, the merge and all that stuff, right? It's just more performant. You get more out of it, right? But that's the trap. And while I believe that there is a consumer tech application to blockchains, it's a subcategory of a subcategory, right? It's like, here's money. There's this other thing you can do, transact and do a few little things, invest in things. And these are like applications on that. And Lightning would fit into that and all these other networks, right? They're consumer tech and would go according to the normal trajectory. But remember, Bitcoin has resisted this from the very start, right? There's always been something faster than Bitcoin, more performant, better. And that's why the mental model of Bitcoin is hard for people to understand, because they've been trained to look for the iPhone 13, 14, 15, right? They've thought that if you make it better, it will beat it. But now, because we're dealing with cryptography, because we're dealing with another kind of technology, right? We confuse consumer technology with all technology. They're not all consumer technology. With what Bitcoin's doing, literally how long it has survived without failing is what makes it valuable, right? That's what makes it valuable. It's the adversarial thinking, and that's what subtracts it from and removes it from the world of logic that applies to consumer technology. It's not a part of that. The other ones are, right? I think Ethereum dies if you build a better Ethereum. Why not, right? There's no need to keep it, right? You can kill any one of these things by making a better one. But Bitcoin has already showed you can make it better, faster, stronger, whatever, right? The same logic of consumer technology, but it won't make a difference. It won't make a difference, because what you're looking for is certainty. It's the hard money piece, right? So whenever you see things break and things go wrong, just like what Justin said here, this the base layer and the innovation, the consumer tech goes on top. And that's okay if the consumer tech stuff breaks. And when consumer tech stuff happens, as in a new generation, a better thing, pay attention. You could probably make some money, right? You're always looking for the new thing when it comes to consumer tech. Bitcoin is not consumer tech, right? We're going to talk a lot about that today, how it relates to the soul, right? We're going to get into those things, right? You can't really talk about that when it comes to other coins, right? Ethereum is just more consumption, more of what we know, right? And so we're not judging that, right? We're talking about changing people's souls, changing their unconscious, right? Changing their orientation in the world. It's a totally different story, right? Now, you don't have to be a believer to watch the show. You don't even have to believe today's show in the soul per se, right? You don't need to. This is not a show where if you don't agree with those things, you're not going to understand what's going on. We're going to try and keep it in a language that everyone understands. But let's start with some fun stuff, right? So let's get into the AOC and Elon Musk stuff. So AOC, who I, just before we start on AOC, I just got to say, very talented person, right? I've recognized her skills from the very start. And here's just an easy way to understand her skills. You ask any American on the street to name 3 politicians, maybe 4, right? And I'm talking about teenagers, anybody, just people who don't care, spending all their time arguing about television and reality TV and wrestling or whatever else people watch, right? So ask them. They'll say, well, Trump, right? Biden, right? They know those 2. There's only really one other that anyone can just name off the street, and it's her. She's got the 3-letter name, AOC. So she must be doing something right. Now, I understand the media gives her too much attention, and she's good looking, and that turns it all into what it is, right? So I'm not trying to say that I like her politics, I respect her points of view. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying talented. But lately, she's been, having a bit of trouble. She's been getting into trouble. She's been saying things and getting clapped back pretty hard. So yesterday she comes out and says, laugh my ass off at a billionaire earnestly trying to sell people on the idea that free speech is actually $8 a month subscription plan. So first of all, a lot of people pointing out, does she think that free speech means you don't have to pay for a subscription? So a lot of people saying, like, did she get those confused? Nevertheless, it was a good trick by her to equate free speech with a cost to use and have speech on a platform. But Elon had, just some of the funniest replies. Your feedback is appreciated. Now pay $8. And it goes on. There's a whole lot more. We've got David Sachs, where, here, this is an insult they use on the Daily Wire for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They call her occasional cortex, because she has these mistakes. So she jumps back in and she says, are you seriously equating an app where people are torrenting racial slurs at an accelerated clip with the New York Times? Oh, sorry, I missed one quote. David Sachs comes in and said, why aren't the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Atlantic free? Their billionaire owners should stop being greedy and give us those products for free. So Occasional Cortex says, are you seriously equating an app where people are torrenting racial slurs at an accelerated clip with the New York Times? Also, FYI, legacy newspapers actually care about verifying newsworthy sources. And they don't charge their journalist creators for priority placement. So I'm losing her thought a little bit, but we're going to get into why this is all important when it comes to this model. So, but here's what you got to know about Elon. All this is going on. You've got this lawyer, Bradley P. Moss, jumping into with the argument around AOC and says he sees to be yes, lecture us on why we should pay you money. That always works, Elon. Enjoying yourself yet? Is this fun, right? So just that he's laughing so much yesterday, people are not okay with that, right? That he's having this great time. And landing rockets, remember, like I said, and landing rockets. So remember, as everyone is going at him, you having fun, he's landing 2 rockets at once. So this lawyer says that. And Sonny McSunnyface comes out and says, in response to Bradley P. Moss, are you enjoying yourself yet? Sonny McSunnyface says, he seems to be having a lot of fun. You seem to be the one upset, my man. And isn't that true? Isn't that untrue? But he wasn't the only person, Mr. Bradley Moss, to be upset yesterday. We saw one of our, let's call him a hero in Bitcoin. Let's even say there are heroes, but we know what we do with heroes in Bitcoin, right? We talked about leadership in Bitcoin a lot yesterday. So one of the people who was a hero, who a lot of people, I think, still admire in Bitcoin, right? I think they still admire him. Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was on Russell Brand yesterday and gave an interview, and parts of it sort of went viral. And I'll say, I've mentioned on this show before that I also had a problem with Jordan Peterson's stance on Elliot Page. Not that I'm interested in dead naming and I care about those trans fights, but my general philosophy is don't be a jerk, right? And if someone asks me to do something insignificant, like call them by this pronoun or not, I'm not so bothered by it, right? And Jordan Peterson used to be sort of the same. I knew Jordan Peterson from before he was so famous, because when I worked in the Canadian Senate, these trans bills first came before us in different forms. And he became famous partly for testifying in those committees, the same way that I brought Andreas Antonopoulos to testify in my Bitcoin hearing. He was brought to testify in some of the original trans hearings. And at the time, he made a very subtle point that got him a lot of favor, which was, I will always use the correct pronouns on an individual P2P basis. If a human being asks me, no problem. His issue was that if governments start legislating this language, it's a huge problem, right? So he made a distinction between what he would do as a neighbor and a fellow human being versus what powers he would give to the government, right? So he never gave an explanation about why he broke that initial position with his dead naming of Elliot Page, also known before her transition as Ellen Page or something. She's from Canada. We're not going to get into the trans this and that. He did give an explanation. He did give an explanation that I appreciated yesterday. So I do want to say that his explanation, finally, of why he criticized Elliot Page satisfied me, even though I don't agree with him. I now understand why he changed, which is important just for my personal understanding of his position. And he just said basically she went from subject of something who I would respect to a perpetrator who's now promoting it, right? So he wanted to take a stance. But you'll notice in the interview that Russell goes really hard at him, right? And keeps coming at him. And you see him start to break into cognitive dissonance. Believe it or not, one of the people we've seen as the most psychologically stable went into pure cognitive dissonance. You can see it. You can see it, right? We talk about it a lot on the show. We talk about what it looks like. It sounds like gibberish, right? He starts spouting gibberish, right? Because Russell's not letting him out of the corner easily. And everything he's trying is forcing him back into the corner. And then in the end, he says something so stupid that Bitcoiners are going to have to reckon with it now, where he says that the only way to use Twitter is by having a real life identity. Now, of course, proponents of Satoshi Nakamoto and everybody else on Twitter, even Jordan Peterson's biggest fan, DeGigi, right, came and said, come on, you're smarter than this, Jordan. Like, this is a mistake. And I think we can all recognize that this is what happens when cognitive dissonance hits your brain. And remember, we're all capable. I'm not trying to sit here and say, look at Jordan, I'm better, or he's now not great. No. This happens to me, right? I mentioned it regularly when I became a terrorist in Canada, for example. You got to stop and admit, like Ilhan Omar and all those people who said that all these spying tools that we thought were going to be used on jihadis were bullshit. They got turned right on us, and we were wrong. And it's hard to admit that, right? And Jordan showed a lot of anger and an inability yesterday to deal with what Russell Brand was pushing him on, and then came up with the stupidest answer we've heard in a long time, because that's what cognitive dissonance can do to you, right? It can break you. And now I think he's going to be fine. I think Jordan's going to work through this. He can self-diagnose. He can self-actualize. He can individuate. But we're going to go on his themes today, right? Because we saw it from him. And of course, he's a big Jungian, Carl Jung, right? His much of Jordan Peterson's philosophy derives from Carl Jung. So we're going to be doing a Jungian analysis today. We're going to be doing some Jungian analysis on the news. We'll let Jordan off the hook from there because we don't know much more about it other than that. But here's what you got to know. Let me just make sure I got my notes correct here. So the thing about the Jungian analysis, right? The thing about this Jungian analysis is that it even springs from a mystic interpretation of history from a fella named Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes, 3 times great. And Hermes was acknowledged as a god in the Greek religion, and you can go through. The Assyrians had him there, as well as Thoth or whatever. So Hermes Trismegistus. And his work on alchemy and his, the reasons for which he was thrice great. The chalice that we use as the symbol for medicine, with the double helix snakes going up it and the wings on it, you'll see it as a pharmaceutical symbol. That was a Hermes Trismegistus symbol because he was heavily involved in medicine and the early science. They say he was Pythagoras's teacher, but his most famous saying, which became a meme in the medieval times and continues to be informative for Jungian analysis, is the following: as above, so below. Right? That was one of Hermes Trismegistus, 3 times great, right? 3 times great. One of the 3 was that saying, right? And Jung goes through it and says, everything psychic has a lower and a higher meaning. As in the profound saying of late classical mysticism, heaven above, heaven below, stars above, stars below. All that is above also is below. Know this and rejoice. Here we lay our finger on the secret symbolic significance of everything psychic. He has a few other, these are from Jung, right? When the mystics descend into the depths of their own being, they find in their heart the image of the sun. They find their own life force, which they call the sun, for a legitimate and, I would say, physical reason, because our source of energy in life actually is sun. Our physiological life, regarded as an energy process, is entirely solar. We can find clear proof of this fact in the history of science itself. The so-called mystical experience of the French philosopher Descartes involved a sudden revelation in which he saw the flash order of all scientists. The British author Robert Louis Stevenson had spent years looking for a story that would fit his strong sense of man's double being, when the plot of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was suddenly revealed to him in a dream. So the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde is a great analogy, and that's even why the dang simulation had to go and make the dollar on Jekyll Island, right? Oh, geez, so right away, Jekyll is the dollar, right? Jekyll is the dollar. Jekyll Island, dollar. Jekyll and Hyde being a alliteration or a literal creation based on Jungian and Hermes Trismegistus worldview, right? And what it basically says is we've all got an ego, we've got ourself, right, and our shadow. We have a collective unconscious, we have a personal unconscious, there is a consciousness, external objects, and the inner world. And this is the same model as above, so below. The analogy is it's the same in the universe, in the cosmos, heaven and earth, as it is in our personal bodies, right? The mystics will say to you that the Jesus dying story and coming back to life is really just a personal evolution that you go through every couple of years on earth, that it is not about your last death and then you go to some heaven, even though that's a part of it too. It's actually about all those times in your life when you've evolved to a ceiling and then you have to evolve further into something new. That is part of the kill yourself and be reborn whole idea. And the way you do that is through these processes of individuation. So we're going to go through the individuation process today and talk about the news a little bit, because it actually starts telling us a little bit about what's going on. And in the end, we're going to get to the point that, because Bitcoin reveals people's incentives, it can't stop revealing people's incentives, right? That's kind of the point here, is that once you fix the money, you start understanding where people are coming from and where people are going in a very transparent way. We talked yesterday about opaque markets and transaction flows being a huge problem for Bitcoiners and something they fear, right? They want to know why you're doing a thing and if the result that you produced comes from the reasons that they understand, right? It's just they want predictability, of course, right? So let's take a look at the news, right? So the first part here is encounter, right? If you want to go through the process of individuation and you want to actually have a healthy psychology and you believe in the Jungian model of shadow and ego, right? Then the first part is encounter. Well, here's one of the amazing things that the Twitter purchase and everything that's going on in the world is bringing to light, right? So take this, for example. Yesterday, you had a guy running for Ohio Senate for the Democrat Party. And he went before the Fox News audience, so a Republican audience, right? And he came and talked about January 6th and said, oh, you know, there was a Capitol police officer who died. You should have heard the audience. You should have heard that audience. Oh, they freaked out, right? They freaked out on him because they're more informed than he is. They knew that, and everybody knows, that the Capitol police officer who died during the January 6th things had nothing to do with the protesters. Nothing, right? He had a heart attack. And people have often used that person as an example. It happened just recently when an MSNBC journalist, or was it a CNN journalist, I talked about on this show, they brought a bunch of just average voters from, I think, Philadelphia or Pennsylvania or one of these states that's a battleground state in the United States. And she was asking him these same questions about January 6th. She said, you know, what about the police officer? And the same thing, the whole audience had to explain to her what actually happened. She didn't know, right? She didn't know. She didn't know. We're in a point now where the average Republican who, and don't even say Republican, the average Bitcoiner, the average person who's not consuming mainstream news every day, the average person who stopped consuming mainstream news because of Trump or because of COVID or whatever one of these reasons is aware, much more aware than even journalists working for working for the mainstream media, right? So most people who live in these bubbles have no idea. They really have never even seen the information, which is one of the big reasons and interesting pieces about Elon Musk coming to own Twitter is that there's a whole world out there that people know nothing about. They've never even heard stuff like this, right? They don't know. They actually don't know. And it goes further, right? It goes further. We now have this DHS piece, right? The Department of Homeland Security leak that's going through. You've got Kim.com, who published a long thread yesterday on spying, him being a hacker, where things are at in the world, and it's reveals a lot. He says government secrets are only secrets to ordinary people, not to nations engaged in the global cyber war. The leaders of the top 20 spy nations know who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Let me explain the reality of the hyper-transparent spy world we're living in today. Top secret means nothing to the top spy agencies in the world. Secrets exist to keep citizens in the dark. Russia and China know exactly who blew up the Nord Stream pipelines because in today's world, it's impossible for an operation like that to leave no trace. Let me explain. All big tech databases are backdoored by every major spy agency. Every smartphone is an open mic to them. Every computer that is connected to the net is wide open. All major chips and most hardware is Trojanized. All the data that one spy agency collects is stolen by the others. All leaders of nations are targeted by spy tech, and not one of them, not even the US president, isn't spied on successfully 24/7 by multiple foreign and domestic agencies. Does that seem true to you? I mean, I don't know the exact details, but sounds reasonable to me, right? I'm not an expert in spy tech. I am not an expert in what's actually going on with this stuff, but what Kim.com says to me here in this tweet thread sounds legit. It could be wrong, but it sounds legit. And it more and more with the DHS leaks, people are starting to understand they're having an encounter with that, right? They're seeing these things come to life and they're hard to hide. They become harder and harder to hide as you go on, right? We have this new opioid settlement yesterday in the United States, right? Now we've got fentanyl, which might be the worst problem in America. It might be. Here's Quartz itself. Quartz itself, through the trial that just ended the past couple of days. So we have the numbers now. I'm going to read the settlements to you. You're barely going to believe what we're talking about, the numbers that we're talking about here. So through the trial, through all the evidence, lawyers arguing, and I'll tell you the parties because this is unreal. Quartz report on this. So first of all, they report on the actual cost of the opioid problem in America. Can you imagine what it is? What do you think the opioid cost estimation is in America? The cost of this, of the fentanyl abuse and all that stuff. It turns out it's a $1.5 trillion a year. It's $1.5 trillion a year. And they've been ordered to pay $53 billion in penalties. And that's $5 billion to CVS, $5 billion to Walgreens, $3 billion to Walmart, all kinds of pharmaceutical companies getting 10. We talked about how OxyContin, one of the first fines, was $2.5 billion. We've mentioned that a lot on the show. Well, the number's been increased now. So the total fine is 53 billion. And it'll be 13 for just those three parties that I mentioned, Walgreens, CVS. Those are the biggest pharmacies in America, by the way, if you're not American, you didn't know that. So right now, we're starting to actually understand the cost of the fentanyl thing. It's not just young men dying anymore, which didn't get any attention, right? Now this is how much money it costs. These are the fines. It's a different story. It's a different story, right? And we're going to start to see things in America that's going to force us to encounter this. Here's a prediction. There's already a video game, I'm told, that's showing this. If there is a change in government, if things change in America, right, in the next 2 years, let's say, in the next 2 years, let me make a prediction. In the next 2 years, if the government changes, if the Ukraine thing goes the other way because the government changes, and the American military is back to not on a war footing, not looking at Europe, I believe they're going to attack Mexican cartels. I believe they're going to send American military into Mexico to fight Mexican drug dealers. I think that's coming. The actual military, not a gun or two, I mean helicopters, the whole thing. They're going to occupy Mexico. I believe that. I believe it's inevitable now. It's inevitable. Because we're going to have to deal with what is probably a bigger problem than any one we have in America right now. The loss of life is greater than any of America's world wars when it comes to young men dying. And even the ones that are surviving this are not really good for much after this, right? They're broken. Like, these guys are, it's like overheating a car engine when you take these drugs. Like, your brain becomes literally the shape of it changes because of the stuff, right? So it changes you forever. So we're going to start dealing with that stuff more and more and more. And when it comes to this, so that's encountering. We're going to start, and the poverty, right? The mismanagement of the economy. And what ends up happening is we're starting to see, remember, it's as above, so below, right? US dollar incentives have poisoned the healthcare system, right? They've poisoned the healthcare system. They've poisoned politics, right? They've poisoned politics. Yesterday, we had the president, right, who made a speech. The US president went to Union Station, which is the train station in DC. I've been there. It's a shithole. I mean, a disgusting, filthy, awful place filled with drugs and smells, right? It's awful. It's awful. You get in there and you get out, right? You get in and you get out. So they cleared out all the homeless people so that Biden could go make a speech there. Now, he had a sundowner moment because he shouldn't be speaking late at night like this, right? It doesn't suit him well. So he goes off, and we just saw an angry speech, right? Dementia people have a lot of trouble keeping the anger down. So this is what he said. We don't settle our differences in America with a riot. We settle them peacefully at the battle box. He said at the battle box, right? And then he said, welcome, gays and gentlemen, instead of ladies and gentlemen. These are not just that his brain isn't working, right? So they went into this place, immediately a reaction to clearing it all out for his speech. Like, there's issues about pushing because it was a last minute thing, right? So he comes and says all this stuff. And anger, right? Wouldn't take any questions on DHS stuff. His press secretary tried to answer questions on the DHS leak stuff yesterday, and this was her quote. It's her trying to answer what misinformation was and what's going on, and here's a reaction, right? So they were asking her about the DHS stuff and whatever. And the clip ends up making it look like an admission that social media companies censor scientific discussion about COVID, violating the First Amendment. So she comes out and just basically says, we didn't want toxic narratives, but did you listen to the science? And they said, well, we had to stop misinformation. It was really just one of these exercises in evasion. However, body language, right? She can't look at the people in the crowd. She keeps her eyes to the ground, stuttering, mumbling. You haven't seen any clips of it because it's so pathetic, right? It's an admission. It's an admission of what's going on and shame, right? We saw when we think of shadow and all these things, shame, guilt, right? That's what gets bottled down here. And if you don't have this process of individuation, it ain't going to break through, right? So we saw yesterday a press secretary on stage before the whole world wallowing in her shame and guilt. Now, I'm not a mind reader. I'm just looking at the body language, right? I'm looking at what she's saying, and she's clearly not comfortable with giving the answers. You can tell when someone's lying. You know, despair and all these emotions have a real sign, right? You can see it, right? It's pretty clear. Now, it just could be pattern recognition. Maybe I'm wrong. But what I saw was someone who was, you know, at step number 2, trying to merge the information. Am I the bad guy? Are we the baddies? Right? Are we the baddies? So that happened yesterday. You even see now with this merger, as things are coming together, you've got the Guardian, you know, this big newspaper, big lefty newspaper in England, right? They finally ran an article today on Kari Lake, the Arizona candidate, right? And the title is A Really Dangerous Candidate, a really dangerous candidate. So she's dangerous, right? So again, we see this, you know, trying to use fear, trying to bring up some of those negative emotions, but people aren't buying it, obviously. She's going to win. She's super popular. You know, the world's going to have to deal with this lady for a long time. Every one of the interviews I watch of Kari Lake makes me say, I've never seen someone more talented than this, including Donald Trump. Right? She's more talented than Donald Trump at that job. I think she could wipe him out if she went for it, right? Just because she's so persuasive, right? Her voice, her delivery, all of it, right? She is the complete package. I haven't seen one weakness in her yet, particularly when it comes to persuasion, right? So the Guardian is right to label her a dangerous candidate, but people's sensitivity to this stuff is starting to grow, and we're gonna get to why it's growing. You know, and yesterday as well, this merger continues to happen as we see the poverty. We saw what happened yesterday with Jerome Powell. He gave a speech on rising interest rates, and Hasaka Trades brought up an interesting quote where when Jay Powell said the following: "The strong dollar is a problem for some countries." And then, you know, because everyone's analyzing, because that's the whole thing, right? People are trying to do these Jungian analyses on the Fed Reserve chair daily, right? Like, what did he mean, right? That's like what's in his unconscious, right? And Hasaka made made a point that he looked into the camera and blinked, basically communicating with other central banks around the world that we don't care about your problems, right? That's the way Hasaka Trades is sort of interpreting this. And I think that's correct. We saw today already the dollar is sort of wiping through global markets because it's all relative, right? All of it is a psychological engine, right? We call them psychological engines. That's what we treat the economy as here, not GDP. It's really just an engine of incentive, will, determination, momentum, right? Those are the psychological forces that help create our future and our economy. And, you know, we always make the distinction that Bitcoiners are able to picture the future so much better than fiat folks, that we're actually going to create our future before they even get around to knowing the future is being written today, right? That's a major difference, that Bitcoin allows you to see the future and populate the future in your mind. And if you can do that, you're, you know, halfway to doing it for real. If you're part of the dollar cabal, right, you can't see past the next Fed Reserve rate, and then you got to use the tea leaves and use some Jungian analysis on what the central banker meant. Not a great system, right? Not a great system. So, you know, moving from there, we've got the corollary to Jerome Powell's story. So we got rates going up, and then at the same time we have this one. This is from Wells Fargo mortgage staff. The biggest headline today is not the Fed. Nope, it's the 90% decline bombshell from Wells. Total housing freeze up. Keep your focus. Housing is the #1 macro driver now and for all of 2023. And the headline is, Wells Fargo mortgage staff brace for layoffs as U.S. loan volumes collapse. Right. So basically saying here that the ability to hide from the economic troubles is going to be over. If it was just interest rates and you were worried about what happened and demand destruction on Wall Street and the ability of them to have liquidity, well, the savings vehicle that replaced the dollar for an entire generation, real estate, is looking like it's going to buckle. Looking like it's going to buckle, right? Now, we've always said on this show that real estate itself was an inappropriate savings vehicle and has created many of the problems we have today, because it's the only thing the majority of people can agree on can hold value, and therefore it has had the most, the widest effect on the largest effect on widening the gap between rich and poor, haves and have-nots. So the threshold now for poor Americans to buy a home, as everyone knows, is just too great, right? That's why we have so much anxiety around home buying and what to do, and did I miss it? You know, people who feel like they've missed Bitcoin, well, times that by 1,000 when it comes to the houses, right? There's people who live in Toronto here that don't think they'll ever be able to afford a house. This, you know, condo that I'm in, right? It's $1 million. It's crazy, right? So no way to hide that stuff anymore. No way to hide it. And in the end, you know, we get back to the aspects of, you know, Bitcoin will reveal your incentives. It will help determine what you're trying to build, where you came from, and what you're trying to build. And here's how it all plays out. So we've got all this, you know, the Pelosi story now, right? We covered that here. And let's just make a quick note on the Pelosi story. I went and watched our old episodes to make sure we got it right and I didn't mislead you. And I'm happy to say we didn't, right? Because here's the thing. We got it right by saying drugs, the Michael Schellenberger analysis, all that stuff. We had a laugh, right, about the underwear and the hammer dildo and that stuff. But never on the show did we say the gay stuff was a real story, right? We didn't say that, right? So luckily, you know, you got to check. I don't want to be a purveyor of fake news, right? So I checked and we're clear, right? We gave a good analysis. So I feel like I, anyway, passed the test by jumping on a hot story and not misleading you from the get-go. As many did, because it's going to be a liability for folks now, because, you know, laughing at that is, we laughed at it, like that's okay. I mean, you want to laugh. There's, you know, as bad as violence is, and we even admitted that when we talked about it, right? We said, let's just all acknowledge it's bad. We don't want to laugh at anyone physically getting hurt, right? Put that aside. And then we talked about why it could be funny and whatever, right? But it's definitely not funny, right? It's definitely violence. But here's a point, right? This is from Cernovich. Nancy Pelosi, a powerful Democrat, lives in a Democrat city that allows open-air drug markets and the knockout game, but somehow it's Trump's fault that her husband, Paul, a convicted drunk driver, was attacked by a drug addict nut job enabled by San Francisco Democrats. Right? Now, Cernovich is the first person to ring the bell on political violence. He was a White House correspondent right when Trump was elected, and he went to the White House and tried to get all the journalists to know about it. And it even happened that it was a connection to Bitcoin, because the original Berkeley riot with Milo Yiannopoulos, right, where there was ass kickings all over the place. If you remember, there was a Bitcoiner, Kira Robles, who got beaten, right? She got beaten that day. She works for Blockstream. I don't know who she works for now, but at the time she was a Blockstreamer, big Bitcoiner, and certainly not a right-wing Trump MAGA Republican, but definitely into the Trump situation and into changing America and all that stuff. So she got beaten pretty bad. Well, they had a follow-up to that, and here's Mike Cernovich's Bitcoin credibility. He did this. I did a public speaking thing once with Mike Cernovich around Bitcoin 2021. He's a big psilocybin fan, the business of and therapeutic uses of magic mushrooms. So we did a session just after the CFTC chair. I wanted to spice it up a bit. You know, I didn't want this boring CFTC stuff. I said, Cernovich, right? We did it on mushrooms and Bitcoin. And we actually took some mushrooms before we went on stage just to make it super authentic. And Cernovich was the first person to bring that up, that beating that Kiera Robles took at the White House. And he was ringing the alarm, and he saved the video. He's sharing it again on Twitter. So if you want to go to his Twitter feed, you can have a look. The White House laughed at him. So he's talking about a person that some of us know getting beaten, went to the White House as one of the people in the scrum around the press secretary, mentioned it, and was laughed at, right? So he also brought up this story. There was, of course, the Steve Scalise. He was a Republican congressman who was shot in the head, right? Someone shot him in the head during a softball game. And that at the time in 2017, so the police killed the assailant, the police claimed that that was suicide by cop, right? They didn't say it was political violence, even though he was a Democrat, hated Trump, never Trumper, blah, blah. He went and shot him. Here's what Cernovich says. FBI leadership claimed the attack wasn't politically motivated, even though the shooter asked for directions to where to find Republicans practicing at the baseball field. Right? So that happened in 2017. Yes, really. And they labeled it suicide by cop. So here again, we're into this assimilation, right? We're into this world. It's not just encounter. It's not just merger. We're into the assimilation time. The merger time is where you see all this anger, and it's hard to process all this stuff. And it does create these psychic breaks, right? Because if this doesn't go well, you're in trouble, right? According to the Jungian analysis, you have to continuously do this process of individuation in order to get this wheel to spin for you to get healthy, right? And that's why when we're dealing with these things, elections and fighting and anger, and they were bad, but you're not bad, but I'm bad, and you're not bad. All the tit for tat, you did this stuff that's going on today, right? Is how this stuff ends up getting worked out. And it reminds me, you know, that there's that famous quote from the Fight Club, right? From the Fight Club, and I'll read it to you. You have a class of young, strong men and women, and they want to give their lives to something. Advertising has these people chasing cars and clothes they don't need. Generations have been working in jobs they hate just so they can buy what they don't really need. We don't have a great war in our generation or a great depression, but we do have a great war of the spirit. We have a great revolution against the culture. The Great Depression is our lives. We have a spiritual depression. Now, that could be true, right? We could listen to what the Fight Club thing says, and I would say if it wasn't for Bitcoin, we would be pretty lost, right? We would be pretty lost. This process of individuation would become difficult. And when he's saying a war of the spirit, right? What I'm saying is the US dollar has actually got us lost in this process of individuation. We don't know up from down because we can't count, right? We don't know people's incentives. There's no way to understand what's going on. They can lie without any impunity. You can't actually get encounter if there is no truth at all. You can't encounter things, right? You can't be forced to face something that is difficult, that needs to be assimilated, that needs to be merged into your conscience, right? It's not possible. You can't do it. So what we're saying here is that because Bitcoin actually, to bring it right back to the beginning, isn't consumer technology. This isn't a coffee. This isn't an espresso. It's not a video game. None of those things, right? It's a way to keep score in the world about everything, about mental health, about how you're doing, how safe, secure you are, how much progress you've made. It's a way to measure things over time. Did they happen? Didn't they happen, right? So what we see here is the dollar, you know, it's manifesting in the external world as anger, and look at Biden and look at these folks, right? Look at these folks. Now take a look at Elon Musk, right? He's trolling, he's landing rockets, and he's a Bitcoiner, right? He's a Bitcoiner. And me personally, if I didn't have Bitcoin, I would be stuck here too. I would be sitting around trying to explain economics to people and teaching people about monetary policy, and it's super boring shit that wouldn't work. It wouldn't work, right? But because I'm a Bitcoiner, because I've gone through these steps and I think, have gone through a process of individuation. And now I know that because I can count things, and because I understand money the way I do, saving money, spending money, investing money, right? All of those things, which are not complicated. There's no secret here. Financial literacy is one of the most basic things and super easy to learn, but you wouldn't even know it unless you went into Bitcoin and then learned it yourself, because they don't teach it to you. I use the example all the time. I was through law school, working as a lawyer, after having a science degree, an English degree, educated in the best schools in Canada and Europe, working for the Senate of Canada in banking law, and I was a financial illiterate. I didn't know anything. It's crazy, but it's true. It's true. Didn't know a thing. But luckily, we got it. Okay, so what do we got here for quotes? Does that make sense, everyone? The whole Jungian thing? Basically said, get wrecked. Yeah. Well, that's what I got for today, team. Jungian analysis, right? Bring forth our better angels. All right, team. Peace. Enjoy your day. See you tomorrow. Oh, scheduling note. I'm going to host with the Bitcoin Magazine folks a political hangout for the election returns. We're not going to do like what's going on, Republicans, there's only 2 places to go right now if you're going to watch this thing. So we're going to be the home for Bitcoiners. We're going to try and give a Bitcoin perspective on everything that's going Bitcoin first. And here's my frame, right? Because we have the moral high ground on almost every issue that's in politics these days. I made a video about it the other day, but I think we're going to work on the illusion a little more. Basically, we're going to talk about, you have a moral high ground, you're a little higher, you can piss, yellow piss, into the red wave, right? And you can create an orange tide. We want to piss into the red wave because we're higher than them. We have the moral high ground, right? So all these fiat people below, right, worrying about politics, seeing the red wave coming. We're going to pee, right, into the red wave with our energy policies and our savings technology and our time preference and all those things and our transparency, right? We're going to piss right into their red wave. And it's going to make an orange tide. And we're going to describe what the orange tide looks like and what we're hoping to see to be uncover in the orange tide, right? That's our whole illusion today. All right, team. See you next time.